We are almost finished. We still have our paper cup though. It's still only white at the top. And we want to get to know a few more shaders to get this fixed. That means we're going to press new here. And so far we've only worked with the Principled BSDF shader. Principled BSDF could be translated as more user-friendly, more versatile. And then BSDF stands for bidirectional scattering distribution function. You don't have to understand it. It doesn't matter at all. But there are many other shaders. If we work in Eevee here on the right, you can see that there's 16 shaders. And if we work in Cycles, there are 20 shaders. And since we will also work in Cycles later, I'll switch to Cycles now. So we delete the Principled BSDF. And what's going to happen now is that we have all black for our lid because no light is coming in or out unless we have a shader plugged in. And then we just press Shift A and we just check out how many shaders there are in the Cycles. And that's 20 in total. And yes, I actually counted them for another tutorial and made a tutorial about this place right here. And I can say that I know these shaders very, very well by now. We now want a diffuse BSDF as a whole, and we also want a glossy BSDF, and we want to merge the two together with a so-called add shader. Now, what is an add shader and what is the difference between an add shader and a mix shader? The add shader has the same relationship to shading as the mix RGB node add mode has to textures. And the mix shader is related to shading in the same way that the mix RGB node is related to textures in mix mode. Everything that has to do with shading here has a green color, and everything that has to do with colors has a yellow color. Okay, let's see what happens now if I add the two together. The reflections of both shades are added together, and I can now, for example, assume the color of the glossy BSDF or the diffuse BSDF and simply check out what the result is. It's looking pretty good, alright. However, we also have a bit of transmission in our lid. We want it to be a bit translucent. So what we want now is a mix shader. We now put it in between, go to the surface output, and we now have our glass as input 1. And as number 2, we have a mix of our diffuse and glossy BSDFs. So that means that if we now mix in a very small bit of glass with a relative high degree of roughness, it can actually look relatively new. I can just see what it looks like if we just mix in the glass what refraction looks like. Now, as I said, we have very diffuse glass here. I think we should bring the index of refraction closer to 1. The index of refractions is a very interesting value. Just over 1 is the sweet spot, maybe even 1.3. The roughness should definitely be relatively high. If the roughness were complete 0, then we would have almost completely perfect glass, and that's not what we want right now. It should definitely be a bit higher, let's say maybe 0.4. And then you can sort of see a bit through, you can see the straw through it, but not too much, and just put the whole thing somewhere where it looks good. Now, we have a bit of transmission, but not too much. Of course, we can turn the roughness down again with the glossy material, and then we have a bit more like a mirror image there, but we shouldn't put it all the way down. And this is how you work with different shaders. So, if we now have our entire McDonald's cup almost finished, I can change the view again, and you will see that you don't necessarily see the transmission much on this side. How is there no transmission in Cycles at all? Well, it's definitely a visible transmission. Therefore, especially here when it comes to the workflow with several fields, you can switch to Cycles so that you can actually see what is going on, because in other modes you won't see it. And one thing we should do now, and not at the end of the modeling before we texturize everything, is make our cup a little bit less perfect, and that's what we want to do. That means we just go in here and have some fun along the way. Now you can see the normals for our cup's lid. Yes, you can make them out again, and that does not look very nice. We're just going to pick one of the random points here. For my sake, we'll pick this one. We press O for proportional editing, we press G, and actually already have the radius set. Now, if we can take a look at the whole thing from a side view, then we can just see here that we might even work a bit with rotation. Just put 1 or 2 imperfections in there in the cover, but not too much, not too little. It just greatly enhances realism if it's not perfectly flat. And so this is very important to add to give it that realistic feel.